how to build a property portfolio which will consist of 10 properties, and if you're on a income of anywhere between even 50 to 80, 100,000, it is still achievable using this strategy, which we'll go through. So the criteria: under bank value is a must. It will allow you to keep borrowing out the equity within 6 to 12 months to keep recycling your initial deposit and closing costs from the first deal throughout every single deal. So you don't have to keep saving up every time, and you only really need to buy the first one and then keep recycling that same amount of capital. Under construction costs, so anywhere between 200,000 and 500,000 is a good sweet spot at the moment. It costs anywhere between 600-700 grand to build a unit in Sydney, or a regional house. So if you can buy properties for less than that, then you're automatically creating equity again when the banks do a comparable sales based off new properties that are being added to the market and your property that you purchased. Has to have a strong cash flow, minimum 5% gross yield, so 5 plus. The area needs to have a growing population, because that'll tie into growth, capital growth. The suburb, if you really want to maximize your growth, the suburb will yet to be going through gentrification, so a transition from a lower class into a middle and upper class area is, or middle class to an upper class. So you want to get in before the herd, like buying the Redfern, Surrey Hills properties back in the day for 50, 100 grand. These days they're going for 2.5, 3 million plus. So if only you bought back then is the types of suburbs that we like to target these days. Yes, you may, I guess, people might put their nose up at you at barbecues or whatever, go, oh, why'd you buy in that area or this area? Well, it's like buying an undervalued stock when no one else wants to buy, and then you hold it for over long term. The areas gentrify as they clean up, as they get a lot of infrastructure spend, and that draws on private investment. Government also sells off a lot of public housing as they build new suburbs and redeploy across the state to minimise the concentration of public housing in pockets, which they originally built between the 1950s and 1970s. They had suburbs of 100% housing, which they are now redeveloping these suburbs over the next probably 10 to 20 years. So there's suburbs out there that are going to get extreme growth and no one will really anticipate or see it coming. And to have a nice balance of both cash flow and capital growth. So not just targeting growth and buying and getting sucked up into the whole blue chip strategy that will get you stuck at one property, or two if you're lucky, if you have a big wage. But then also not going out, say, Broken Hill and buying a property that has a 12, 13, 14% yield, because you have next to no growth because the population is declining. So you want a nice balance of both. You want the growth and you need the cash flow to be able to stand the game and keep scaling. So a perfect, or our sweet spot for to build a property of 10 properties in 10 years. We stay when you start. You should just get in the market. So usually people that come to us don't have a huge amount of capital savings, so cash savings saved up, ready to go, or their servicing is low. So we like to get them straight into the market by buying either a unit in Sydney or a townhouse. Sydney units, Brizzy townhouses. You can either go over to Perth or Adelaide, or Melbourne's a bit soft at the moment, but that's initially getting started. We like to buy maybe 2, maybe 3 max units or townhouses. For us, you don't want to buy too many of them, because you can't really add a huge amount of value to a unit or a townhouse that's in a complex. You can rip out a kitchen or a bathroom and do the flooring and paint, but you can't redevelop it. So you can't knock it down, you can't build it, subdivide it, you can't, because you're tied into another strata scheme. However, it's better than having no property, so it's good to just get started, to get on the ladder, and then they're relatively easy to recycle your capital back out of, and then keep rolling that. And then we like to buy houses on large blocks where you can add a granny flat or subdivide and build a house in the back. And then we like to buy, say, about 5 of them. So you'd have 2 or 3 townhouses or villas or units, depending where you buy. And then we like to go regional for the houses. So good 4 or 5 houses. And then we like to finish it off by buying a duplex or a triplex or quadplex. So 2 properties or 3 properties or 4 properties on one title, where you own the whole block, so you're not paying strata. You have a really good cash flow, you have good growth because they're in good locations. They can be harder to get into, so you do need a bigger deposit, usually minimum 20%, but typically even 30 or even 40% deposit sometimes, because the banks see them as being higher risk, because there's only investors who look to buy these types of properties and not the rest of the market. So there's only 7-8% of Australia people looking to buy blocks of units. So they they take longer to transact, so can be harder to sell. Can take up to like easy 6 months to sell a block of units or duplex or triplex. But for that reason, you can get them at good prices, because you know that you don't have much competition when buying these types of assets. They start at around the $450 mark, and then the more you spend, the better value you get. But typically between like the 600 to $1 million, we can, or 1.5 million bucks, we can get a block of 4 or up to 8 units, 10 units. So that's good to then tack it on once you've built a decent base, and your portfolio is cash flowing, so it's not eating into your lifestyle, it's not putting you at a risk, because you've got a good cash flow, and that will get you to a good 10 properties in 10 years. At that point in time, you then have a lot of options to either sell down some assets to pay off debt, consolidate, or you may want to just keep going. For me, what I'm doing now, so I'm at 13 or about to be 13 properties in 6 years, just over 6 years. So I started in 2017. So I got 2 townhouses I've got a block of 2 units, and then I've got 9 standalone houses, and out of those houses I can subdivide probably 6 of them, because they're on large blocks of 800 to 1,000 square meters, so I can cut them in half and build a second house in the back. So that is my plan over the next few years, is to start subdividing all the houses. I'll continue to keep buying at least one every 6 months is my goal, but as the property's values go up, so I've picked up properties for that around the 250 mark. Instead of going and buying another property for the ones that are closer to the CBD, so instead of going and buying another property in the same suburb, which I've already got one, for 500,000 or 600,000, where I've bought for, off the top of my head, I think it was 240 to 250 mark, inner Brisbane, so only within half an hour from Brizzy. I can subdivide it, build a second house for the 250 mark. So then I'm getting it at wholesale. So I'm not spending market rate. I'm getting it 50% off, and then I rent it out. And the beauty is, when you subdivide a block, you're creating a new title. So I would leverage up the front house, so I'd increase the loan, use that money to do the DA, subdivision, build the second house. So once it's subdivided, the front house would have all the loan, and because I'm creating a second house with its own title, but I've used the money that I've leveraged the front house, I can then have the second house in the backyard will be unencumbered with no loan. So then I can go back to the bank, get it valued at market rate, 500-600 grand, borrow up to 80%, 400 grand, deposit back, credit into my account, and then increase the loan, and then I use that funds to keep recycling and buying more assets. So that's the benefit of buying the houses, where you can hold them for one market up, so one market cycle, so 5-6 years, and then it'll say double in value. Then you can subdivide it, build a second house in the back, and then in a second market cycle, so say in 15 years time, I could then even knock it down and then build 4 to 5 townhouses on each of those sites where the houses are, that have a house. So my plan is, I'm going to, as I develop the properties I've got, I'll start by developing the ones closer in, because the values are higher, and then going out and continually building out the portfolio further away from the metro cities and further out into the regions as the values go higher over time. So, and then it also allows me the options where, for instance, I've got a house my first house I bought was in the Hunter Valley in Maitland, which is half an hour northwest of Newcastle, an hour and a half or 2 hours north of Sydney. That was my first house I ever bought. That's a weatherboard house on a corner block. So it doesn't quite stack up now, but it will it's probably worth now about 600. I bought it for 240. I renovated it, and went to sell it, but I couldn't flip it at the time, so that's when my strategy changed to a buy and hold strategy, and now my strategy is pretty much a build to rent, or buy and hold and build to rent strategy, where I buy sites, rent them out, collect the rent, live off the rent, and then when the sites stack up to then develop, then I'll develop them. So I'll develop Maitland, which is a corner block, which I could probably put 2 townhouses on it, if not maybe 3. There's a bit of complexity with it because it's in a floodplain, but it hasn't flooded there in Maitland since the 70s, because they've built the levees up. So councils are also screaming for new housing in Maitland LGA, because it's one of the fastest growing LGAs in Australia. I don't really advocate buying there now because the prices have just gone stupid. But I'll be able to, instead of knocking down the weatherboard house, because it's a beautiful hardwood weatherboard house, what I'll do is I'll relocate that house to probably where I'm driving today, regional Queensland or regional New South Wales. So instead of building another house at a site I've already got, when I subdivide a site, I'll relocate my Maitland house, put it on the back of a truck, or get a contractor to put it on the back of a truck, shift it all the way out to where I've got my other properties further out in the regions. I'll subdivide them. You have to go through all council and get the plans done, drop it down on the deck, hook it all up with the services, put new fencing, driveways. So I'll save on demolition and I'll save on new construction. So when you're saving money, you're making money. So I'll then be able to develop Maitland, put 2 or 3 townhouses on Maitland, and I'll shift the house out into the either New South Wales regions or Queensland regions, wherever it makes sense, and then hook it all up, paint her up, touch her up. Might need a small cosmetic reno once it's been trucked up, because they've got to pull the houses apart. They usually cut them in half or even in thirds, and then they put them back together and then drop it down and rent it out. So that's a good way to get the property that I already own to create a second property or another property to the portfolio. It's sustainable. I'm keeping the actual structure of the house. I'm not demolishing it. I'm not throwing it away. I'm not sending it to landfill. And these structures last years. They just need to pan her up, rent it out, and then it's all set. So my strategy is I'm going to keep moving all my weatherboard houses further out into the regions as I develop the sites to put on higher density. And then when I subdivide the larger blocks out in the regions, instead of me needing to build another house, I can just relocate existing house structures that I already own. So it'll take one market upcycle to make the property stack up to do either a granny flat or a subdivision into a second house. That is 5 to 6 years, and then it'll take a second market upcycle. So they say every 7 to 8 years, but good 15 years, and then they'll double again to then make it stack up to then knocking down those weatherboard houses to eventually build just blocks of units and have blocks of 4 to 5 villas or townhouse style, and then rent them out. So I don't mind picking up weatherboard houses. They are, I guess, in the interim higher maintenance compared to brick, but I know that over time I'm going to develop the sites anyway, so it doesn't really matter. They're easy to move. Move them further out west as the values of the land closer to the cities increase in values and make the sites stack up. And then when I build blocks of units on the sites, they'll be built-in block work, so core filled construction block work, so solid as a rock, for good for renting out, because that type of construction, core filled block work, it's very hard to damage and low maintenance. So you almost don't even need gyprock. You can just paint the core filled block work internals and external. So cost of construction is low, maintenance is low, and you can put high density. Potentially see how zoning goes, but we may even be able to go 2-story some of the sites to keep building up the portfolio. Because my goal for me is to hit 100 rentals, and the only way to get that quickly is by development and adding value. And because then when you start developing, then you can build 4 or 5 townhouses for the 200 grand, 180 grand, 200 grand mark. So once they're completed, they could be worth 400 or 500, and they would rent out for $500 a week. So if it makes sense, it makes dollars. Anyway, catch you on the next video.